Welcome, everybody, to the Digital Nomad Experts podcast by Commute. And today you've got Jeff and Marisa, and we're going to talk about the top 10 most Googled questions about digital nomad life. So we went and took a look at the data. We searched digital nomad, and we found which questions people are searching the most often on the internet about the digital nomad lifestyle. So that could involve jobs, it could involve day-to-day, could involve tips and tricks, all that kind of stuff. So we're excited to get into it. We're going to answer each one of these questions briefly. And a lot of these questions we actually have entire episodes recorded on. So we're going to reference back to some of those entire episodes if you want to hear the full versions of those questions. Before we get into number one, Marisa, how you doing?
I am good. It's early morning. It's earlier morning for you, so our brains are just getting going, but I'm doing good, and I'm excited to answer these questions. They're fun ones, as Jeff said. I think if these are the most commonly Googled questions, we love to look at data of we generally know what people are asking, but it's fun to see the data, and so we're guessing you probably have a lot of these questions on your mind too. And as Jeff said, these will be, I like to think of these as the Spark Note answers of each of these questions, because they really can all be each full episodes, and we have a lot of them. But excited to kind of top line answer them all in one place for you. And then if you hear something that you want to learn more about, you can dig a bit further. But with that, Jeff, how are you doing? How are you feeling before we jump right in?
It's 6:30 in the morning. I'm ripping and roaring. That's my prime time. I'm cooking. Yeah, I'm doing good. Still in California. I'm going to be here for a little bit. And I think that's going to tie in nicely to the first question, surprisingly,
okay.
is what is a digital nomad? So
yes.
What are we? How do you define yourself? How do we unpack that in a 3-minute
I've got a good
segment?
Short answer,
Ooh,
and then we can elaborate. And actually, this was, I think, the very first episode that me, you, and Diego did all together for the whole podcast, I think was labeled, What is a Digital Nomad? So if you want to pop all the way back to episode number 1 and hear the real long version. It's really fun to get Diego's take on this, because I feel like he's been, I don't know, it just feels like he's been nomading for a long time, and then the digital nomad lifestyle appeared. But I think of a digital nomad, I wish I had this actual definition written down, but as someone who can do their work online from anywhere, and so you have no geographical restrictions of somewhere you have to be. So yeah, when I think about a nomad versus a digital nomad, right? A lot of people were nomadic before, but you had to, if I think about it in terms of what we're doing in traveling, to make money, they would arrive to a place and be like, okay, I got to find a farm to work on. I got to find a hostel to work in to make money. I'm going to be a bartender for a little bit in this small town in Australia because I got to make some money and live.
That was the old work and travel plan.
Yeah. So if you think of just a nomad, it was really work and find money locally some way wherever you are. So the digital part to that is you make your money online, and that really frees you up to be anywhere in the world that you want. And a lot of people will call this just kind of geographic freedom or geographic independence. So you're not tied to a place to make your money, and you can make it online. So that's my definition. If I would explain it technically, there's a lot more other things, maybe more fun answers, but I'm curious, how would you answer that question, Jeff?
No better than that. That was a nice, tight definition.
Well,
I feel like my brain was going onto a 20-minute rant, and you just kind of tightened it down to 30 seconds. That's exactly how I would really succinctly define it. One thing I would probably add is that there is a misconception out there about how long people spend outside of their home as a digital, to be qualified. Do you have to qualify as a digital nomad by being fully traveling all of the time, or traveling 2 months or 1 month? What exactly is a digital nomad? So I think you kind of just answered that question by saying you can work geographically wherever you want. There are periods of time where us digital nomads are home for a while, recharging, doing whatever, still working remote. I might pop over to the other side of the United States for a week or something like that and go back home, or might travel 11 months of the year. Doesn't really matter. It doesn't really fit into the guidelines. There's no guidelines. There's no qualifications to. It just means that if you want to pick up and leave today to Bali, South America, wherever, you have the capability to do that. And I think that pretty much just sums up. That's what a digital nomad is, even if they're in hibernation.
I was like, yeah, so I have a 6:30 a.m. question for you. Can your brain answer? So if someone has a remote job, but they have geographic freedom, they technically could go anywhere, but never ever have, does that make them a digital nomad?
Ooh, I think you got to break the ice.
You have to do it once.
You got to pop the cherry. Yeah, no, you're a remote worker at that point. I don't think you're...
So there's somewhere, like, you have the freedom, but you've actually done it. Because then we also talked, I think, about this in that first episode, too, is then maybe if you decide to stay in one place, let's say you've traveled around for a while, a lot of digital nomads find a place they love, maybe burn out from travel, or just change lifestyle and find a place and stay for years and become more of that expat, which is like you're living in another country. So I don't know, maybe we lose our exact definition here. So I'm going to add to mine, which is like a digital nomad is someone who, one, can work remotely online. It's a freedom to be anywhere in the world at any time. And then I guess the third one that we're going to maybe add is maybe you travel from time to time doing your job. So you're not fully living in another country that's not your own. You're an expat. It's not that you've never left because you're just a remote worker, but there's somewhere in between. And like Jess, I'm actually back home in Atlanta right now. You're back home in California. So we do go home. It doesn't mean you have to be traveling 12 months out of the year, but it kind of gives that freedom and you're popping around at least every now and then, if not full time. Is that a good definition? All right, I like it. I think we've just defined digital nomad.
we send it out into the wild and see what gets sent back to us.
It's official.
Yeah.
Okay, I love that answer. So, all right, moving on to number 2. We're just getting some official things here. The brains are getting moving. So number 2, Jeff, most commonly asked questions on Google. How do digital nomads make money?
Number 1 here is that you need to have a specific skill set. There's a specific way that you need to make money. And we know that's 100% not true. We've got an episode, I don't have it pulled up, like the most unusual jobs that we've seen as... Yeah. Oh, actually.
Yeah, Diego and I did 2 parts. 45. There was 2 different episodes. Yeah. And maybe a couple after that we did even more. Yeah, of just like all the unusual jobs, some of the most unusual ones that we've actually met people in real life in the wild doing.
There's some weird ones, for sure. So, yeah, it can range quite a bit. But let's get back to, I think, the core meaning behind the question is like, how do I start making money? Not how do I get the most unusual job? And we've actually answered that one quite a few times. We do it pretty well in episode 101. But I would say, and we've been telling the audience because we get this asked quite a bit in email.
Yeah.
How do I start? Best way to start is to work for a company that lets you work fully remote, right? So that's exactly what we're doing. That's what you all asked for, was how do I find these fully remote companies? How do I find these fully remote jobs that give you permission to travel the world? It's by far the easiest way to start as a digital nomad and make money. I would say probably because it's the lowest risk, right? In my mind, I see it as like the most secure way to do it. What would you add to that?
Okay, so to that question, Jeff, the episode that you referenced, 101, I think it's called something like 5 different ways to make money as a digital nomad. So we talk about almost like a ladder of freedom, which is starting with just working for another company, your typical 9-to-5 job. And as Jeff said, that's the way we recommend to get started, because you can get that the quickest and start making money reliably the fastest. So if you're listening to this and you're like, I just want to start making money remotely in this definition of a digital nomad so I can start traveling the world, that's the way to go. And as you kind of go up, there's different ways. You can do freelance work, you can be an entrepreneur, you can be an investor, you can have passive income, you can win the lottery. There's all different ways to have income that, like, to me, it's the ladder of sort of freedom and typically what we see digital nomads kind of like stepping up and working towards. Because theoretically, as an entrepreneur or freelancer, you have more time and you have more freedom over your life and maybe the times you have calls and where you want to be at any given time, or if you have to be on a meeting instead of on a plane that you want to be on. So there's more freedom sometimes the way you go up that ladder. But typically, if you start a company or you start freelancing, for example, it's just... we talk about this in that episode, but sometimes you never know when your next paycheck will come from. So you might be doing really well, and then you stop working for someone and you're, halfway across the world and you're like, I don't have an income coming in right now. So that's, at any, you can also get laid off from a job. There's, nothing is ever set in stone, but it's just a little bit kind of rockier. And, we talk about when you start digital nomad life, there's enough hard things that you're figuring out and doing in new ways already. It's really just, we recommend the easiest way is starting with a company, because it just feels like you don't have to worry about where your money is coming from. You just have to do your job, versus a freelancer. You're like, I have to do my job and worry about where the money's coming from. And then an entrepreneur, your company might not start making money for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, So that's sort of why there's all different ways you can make money as a digital nomad, which that's the kind of bulk question. So as Jeff said, the fastest way is just to get a remote job. If you're interested in that, definitely join our email list, beachcommute.com/email. We send out remote companies each week. We send you a lot of tips on how to get remote jobs, the best companies to do it with, all of that. So if you're not already on our list, highly recommend joining that if you're interested in getting a remote job. But yeah, as Jeff said, I think if we pull it back, so who knows what this question is really meaning, but digital nomads make money in the weirdest ways, all sorts of ways, from gaming, gambling. What do we have? Someone who was not like a sex worker is the wrong word. Don't quote me there. Someone who did what were the calls?
Man.
What do you call it?
The old one where they call
dominatrix calls. Dominatrix. Yeah. It's almost like a remote dominatrix. You can be into anything you want. So I like to think about it. Anyway, you can make money in the world, in the real, if you can do that in any sort of remote way, you can become a digital nomad. So if you also Google Digital Nomad Experts podcast and search for 7 most common jobs, something like that. We have lots of episodes like the most common jobs, things like that. But there's all sorts of ways to make money, but those kind of split up the 5 different types of ways you can make money. So I think that answers that question as briefly as we can.
Cool. I got nothing to add to that. So let's go to question 3, which is a tough one to really answer in a couple of questions, because we've really covered it 19 different angles. The question is, what are the best places to live, to travel as a digital nomad? And God, there's so many different ways you can unpack that. Let me just start at the very highest level. I think that makes the most sense. I'm going to start with best starter locations for digital nomads. Okay. That's episode 10. Let's talk about why starter locations is important. There's a lot of things that we put into consideration when we talk about what's a good digital nomad location, especially for people that are just starting out as digital nomads. Yeah. The first thing is, I would say, community, in my mind. Yeah. The whole point of this thing, traveling alone, sure, it's fine for a couple of weeks. We've all done that, or a lot of people have done that. It's okay. But really, the value, and we've talked about this so many times, is the shared experiences with like-minded people, making like-minded friends, and just building a community and feeling like you're part of something. And that, heads and tails above everything else, is the reason I like being a digital nomad. So
is that a phrase? Heads and tails above everything else? I've never heard that.
I feel like I've got a lot of these that you've never heard before.
You do. we grew up in 2 different worlds. What are these phrases?
You're gonna find out someday. I've just been trolling you with these.
I think
and
you have.
None of them.
I don't think anyone says that.
Google it. That's a thing.
Heads and tails. All right.
Or is it?
When we hop off.
You're gonna look like an idiot when there's nothing there.
I'm gonna Google it while you keep talking.
Community. All right, do it. Okay, so community is number 1. Cost of living is a huge one, especially for up-and-coming digital nomads. You don't want to go somewhere that's equally as expensive as where you currently are, because you have to pay for a flight and you have to pay for an Airbnb on top of probably already living at home. So it's going to be a very expensive, go to Western Europe, which is going to be way too expensive for you. So we choose a lot of places that are less expensive than generally North America and Western Europe. So cost, community, safety is another consideration, and then workability, I think, is the last one. Correct me if there's one more thing. Yeah. How stable is the internet? Starting out in La Paz, Bolivia, probably not a good idea. With Diego did a great job, but he created this crazy mesh network of satellites on his house that basically created the Death Star. When we all lived
there together.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know how the hell he pulled that together, but
it might be. I think it's actually a lot better now. That was a lot of years ago. He said they have good solid internet there now.
I'm sure he's the guy with that. And actually, that list of places that you can't go to because of unstable internet is getting smaller and smaller. There's places that I used to go to, beach towns, Puerto Escondido. I was notorious. Santa Teresa, rolling blackouts, bad internet. I think a lot of these places are just getting Starlink. So it's that list is dwindling down and there's more and more places available.
Yeah.
But anyways, that's the 4 criteria. With that, do you think it makes sense to maybe just list out like 3, 4, 5 locations that would be
just like
good?
some top ones if you want to know more about, like, I think we visited episode 10, you said was those top 6 starter locations. So if you want to know like what is each one of these locations like, what is it like living there, what's the vibe, all of that, check out that episode for sure. It's a great one. But just to give some ideas, so Bali, Indonesia is always a top one. That will really depend if you can go on that time zone. Medellin in Colombia, Playa del Carmen in Mexico. Those are the top 3 that are coming to my mind right now. What else would you say?
I would maybe Buenos Aires, just because it's pretty easy. I would also, it sounds a little overwhelming, but Mexico City, when you go to the right spot, really, really easy. Not so affordable anymore. Yeah, I think I'd probably just keep it at that. I think that's a pretty good starting list.
Chiang Mai, Thailand. That's another one. Chiang Mai Island and Koh Phangan in Thailand is another little island. So I would throw those in there as well. Always tons of digital nomads, not very expensive. The other thing I would throw in there, and this is super seasonal, maybe in the summer, would be Banksko in Bulgaria, which might seem like a really random one, but it's become pretty much from one person who throws a digital nomad festival. Kind of got on the map as a digital nomad hotspot. So it's a funky one, but you'll find people there as well, especially in the summer. So yeah, those are just some ones that really hit all of Jeff's criteria.
Yeah, check out episode 126. We've got a list of the top locations that you can live for under $2,000 per month too.
Yeah.
And each one of those satisfies each one of those criteria. So we went and checked what is the average cost of living for each one of these locations. So we did verify you can live in each one of those spots for under $2,000. And as a starter digital nomad, probably a good thing to watch expenses as you're determining if this is the lifestyle that you want to live.
Yeah, we also did, I want to throw in, was that 126 you just said?
Episode 126 on that one, yeah.
Yeah, it was like those 9 starter locations. But the other thing I wanted to add, because I was just having a conversation with someone recently who isn't yet a digital nomad and was talking about location. So to me, there's kind of like 2 camps of locations you can go as a digital nomad. One is like, I'm going here because it's easy to be a digital nomad and to start and find community. And then there's just like places you want to go anywhere. So when it says like, what are the best places for digital nomads? You can be a digital nomad anywhere you want to go. Literally anywhere in the world, you can decide to be a digital nomad and live there. So if you have a dream to go to Botswana, like you can go be in Botswana. But if you're just starting out, I mean, the Wi-Fi and everything's definitely a factor too, especially if you're working for another company. But community is really like the biggest thing. As I was talking to this person, to me, I was like, if you're going to go live this lifestyle, if you don't meet a community to travel with, you're going to burn out, you're going to hate this lifestyle, and you're going to leave and not think it was so great. So as Jeff said, like, can I solo travel? Yes, I can, but I don't like to. So I like to know that like I'm capable, I can do it. I'm, a girl who can travel, whatever. But I love to have community. Like, we're social creatures by nature, and if you don't find people to share this journey with, you're going to be really lonely and be like, what was the point of this? Why did I want, like, I'm looking at this really cool thing, but I'm lonely and I don't want to do this anymore. So the best locations for digital nomads are typically like on top of the Wi-Fi and the safety and all these things, or like where are other digital nomads that are easy to meet. And then once you have that community, you can take those people and travel anywhere you want to go together.
Take them.
So,
yeah. Take them.
Just take them with you.
Come here.
Come on. We're going over here.
Get my carry-on. We're going over here. Just take them.
True. It's true. We do that, right? Like when we want to go to weird places. I'm like, Jeff, let's go over here. Like I ended up Romania because you were there and with a group of friends. I was like, all right, like that's where we'll go. We want to be where the friends are. I don't necessarily want to be in Romania, but like I gotta go somewhere and you're nearby. All right.
And you didn't regret going there in the least bit.
Nope. But had fun with you guys. So anyway, yeah, that's the kind of split between you can go anywhere, but the best places are usually because that's where the nomads are congregating, and we've got a lot of those episodes that are great if you want to learn more about what each of those locations is really like in great detail. We've done that. Okay, so next one on here, I think this is number 1, 2, 3, 4. This one just says, like, how do digital nomad taxes work? It's a really big question, and it's not our favorite. What do you want to start to say? And I can try. Yeah. I'm going to try to answer this briefly. If you're not watching this video, Jeff has like his hands over his eyes. He's like rubbing his face. His brain is hurting. He's just like, I don't know. I still don't know 8 years into this. What I'll say, I'm just going to give the top line answer of what people think is the issue. And always, we are not accountants. We highly recommend working with an accountant, especially find one who, like if you're really doing the digital nomad life, find one who specifically specializes and understands digital nomad taxes, because there definitely are tons of tax advantages you can have as a nomad that your average accountant won't know, because 95% of the world is not living this way. So with that, I think a big misconception, I'm going to start with the misconception I think people have about taxes. I'm going to actually rewind further. When I was working at Pepsi back in the day, I was working for a huge corporate company. I really wanted to like go live in Australia and work for Pepsi, and go live in Thailand and work for Pepsi. And it's really expensive for a company to do that, because then I would have to figure out like they'd have to pay taxes for me probably like overseas, because I would have been like living for year plus in these locations and would have to pay taxes in another country. That was many, many years ago, old school way. When you travel as a digital nomad, there's sort of like a couple different ways you can go. Jeff and I, correct me if I'm wrong, have never ever once in our whole lives ever gotten what people call a digital nomad visa. Have you ever gotten a digital nomad visa, Jeff? Okay. No. So theoretically, if you want to, there are some, like the way we travel and most people ask about digital nomad life is you're kind of popping around to different countries all the time. If you are listening to this and you want a remote job because you dream of just moving to one country or spending a year or two in like a specific country, you're going to have to figure out some tax stuff. You either might have to pay taxes in that country, or hopefully there's a lot of countries now that have what are called digital nomad visas. So you pay a fee to live in that country for, call it a year, but you're not paying taxes there per se. So they benefit from you adding, money to their economy there from spending at local vendors. Like they want digital nomads because it helps their economy, but they're not yet collecting like actual taxes from you when you get a digital nomad visa. So not every country has that. So maybe you want to stay in a country for a year or two that doesn't have that, and you might have to figure out how to pay taxes and figure out weird things in that country. If that's what you're doing, Jeff and I are not qualified to tell you how to do that. Definitely find an accountant who does. So option 2 then is if you want to stay in a place for a year or two, get a digital nomad visa, and then that kind of helps you not have to pay taxes, but you can stay in that place. And then the third category, which is what Jeff and I have been doing for many years, Diego as well, is we almost never stay in we don't stay in a place long enough to have to pay taxes. So you're traveling to places where you just get a typical tourist visa. So before I started living nomad life, I was just like, I'm just going to this country. I just give them my passport and I leave in a week or two, and I never even thought about it. But when you go, for example, if I were to go to Mexico, most people from the US or wherever are just going for a week or two vacation, you just, you don't think twice, but actually you can stay for up to 180 days. Depending on which country you're from, it might be a little less, just on a simple tourist visa. So if you just stay in that 180-day window, you don't pay taxes, and you could stay up to 6 months just going there. So every country is different. For example, in Thailand, you can do a 30 or a 60-day visa. Then you can extend that visa a couple of times. In Bali, it's the same sort of thing, 30, 60 days. You can just leave and fly to Singapore or Malaysia, quick flight, come back, your visa starts over. So there's lots of different ways, and that's why this question just like kind of goes crazy. But you don't have to pay taxes when you are just traveling as a tourist. And so when you go to these countries, a lot of people will say, like, you're asked on your little text or your forms when you enter, like, are you traveling for work or for pleasure? So you always want to say, like, you are just traveling for fun. No one needs to know that you are doing your job from wherever, like working from your laptop. Like you're just a tourist traveling the world. And sometimes after many years, like I have gotten questions. They're like, how are you traveling this much? Like, do you have income? What are you doing? Like, that's a topic for another day. I've only had one friend like really, really, really get questioned about that, where they asked her, like, what is your source of income? Like, where have you been at this time? How are you here? I was somewhere in I think traveling to Israel, because I ask a lot of questions. But anyway, that's sort of top line. But I guess the question is, you just pay taxes in your home country and you be a tourist everywhere else you go. And then there are some tax benefits you can get that I'm not going to get into too much detail, but just as an example, I'm not as familiar. I know I have friends from Germany who have left their German residence because they're traveling X number of months a year and they don't have to pay taxes there. I have friends in Israel who have like left their basically in the same way their residency there, so they don't have to pay taxes. You have to be gone for like X amount of, months of the year for 5 years. Like there's some weird rules in the US, for example. You can not pay some taxes if you are out of the country for 330 days of the year, and you can prove that, or there's lots of different ways. So there's a lot of benefits. You can actually not pay taxes in your country if you're really traveling a lot of time, but work with an accountant. We'll try to get somebody like that to share more on a podcast episode, but that's my top line, like babbling about it. Anything you want to add, Jeff?
I do not want to add anything.
I didn't think you did.
Conversation. Not at all. No. I thought of something just a moment ago, and I was like, no, it's probably wrong, and it's bad advice. Let's just not.
That's just not. So yeah, that's some kind of top line stuff. Yeah, definitely talk to accountant. But I hope that at least gives you an understanding that you don't have to like become a resident or pay taxes in every country that you travel to. Just keep your home address or a PO box or a friend's address or your parents' address and say it, that is yours, that is your address, and just travel as a tourist unless you really want to stay somewhere for a year or more and check out digital nomad visas and other options. So we're going to close out the tax question for now. But we almost, guys, to be fair, we almost removed this one because Jeff and I just hate that question. Not because it's like we kept it for you. So hopefully you're thanking us because it's so important and it's a big, big hurdle and question that people have when figuring out, like, can I even be a nomad? Like, how am I going to do this? What about my company? So we kept it in there for you, but it's just like, we don't like it either. But it works. So with that, I guess this is our fifth and final question for now.
Yeah. The last question for today is how do I become a digital nomad, which is an entire episode again. So
how do you become a digital nomad, Jeff?
So I'm a big believer in testing it before. A lot of people have it in their mind that you have to go all in on this kind of thing. Like you see the Instagram pictures, you're like, oh, they're traveling the world. I guess that means I have to give up my lease. I have to sell my house. I have to get rid of my pet. I have to do all of these things and have this whirlwind of change in my life. And that's not necessarily the case. And that's definitely not how I started this journey. I started this journey working for a company, and I saw a month-long chapter is what we call it at Wi-Fi Tribe, where Wi-Fi Tribe Diego, our co-founder, owns the company and sets up month-long excursions to different places in the world where you work and live with people for 4 weeks. And I saw one was coming up in Colombia, and I messaged my boss and said, I want to work from Colombia for a month. What do you think? And he's like, can you make meetings? Yeah, of course. So it was no problem.
The easiest transition that's ever happened.
Didn't know. I didn't know that this meant. Actually, I don't think I even knew the expression digital nomad at the time. I just was going to go live in Colombia for a month and didn't have to make any major decisions other than buying a plane ticket. That was basically it. I had a place to go. Very, very easy transition. After doing that the first time, I decided, okay, this needs to be a regular thing. Then I started making decisions, and we can get into how you make some of those more sustainable, permanent decisions to live a digital nomad lifestyle. But I think the crux of the question is, how do you start? How do you become a digital nomad? And I say, give it a test run. Pick an easy location, one of those places that we already talked about, somewhere kind of cheap, good community, easy to get to, language barriers not too difficult, easy to work from. Buy a ticket. Well, I mean, talk to your boss. Got to do that. If you're working for a company, if you are currently working for a company, talk to your boss and say, hey, look, I want to give this a test run. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to have full availability during these times, over-communicate everything that's going to happen the whole time, and then say, hey, do you have any objections to this? If they don't, give it a month. See if you like it, And then if you do like it, maybe then, Marisa, we could get into some of the more complex decisions that you would need to make. Yeah. For example, you've got a house, right? Like, what do you What did you do with your house when you started to get into this more? Do you sublet your house? Do you sublet your lease? There's a lot more questions to get into it. But anything to add to like the starter package?
Yeah, it's good. Like the starting point. It's funny, just as you say that, just to chime in, I also did a 4-month kind of like test run to start too, because I was like, I'll do 4 months and maybe I'll hate it. And then I tried it and I'm done. But then like 8 years later, here we are still doing it. So I love that way to start. But it's funny, actually, when I read this question, I interpreted it a little bit different, just like how to become a digital nomad. My first thought was just like, you get a remote job. Like you get a job that makes you income and then you're free to go wherever. So it depends how you interpret the question of like how to become it is find a way to make income from your computer. I guess that kind of ties back to question number 1. That gives you the freedom to, but I like that I like that we answered them differently. Yours is a little bit more tactical. Okay. And then it's like, all right, and now what do I do with all my belongings? What do I do with everything from home? How do I start? Where do I go? So yeah, it's a little bit of both, but I would say, find a way to make income from your computer, which is just get a remote job. Again, check out beachcommute.com/email to get on our list. Or also beachcommute.com/91 is a really great resource. It's 91 remote careers that you can do while you travel the world. If you're not sure which one is right for you, that's a really great resource too. And then once you have that, just kind of take the leap. And as Jeff said, do a trial. Choose one of the top 6 starter locations that we talk about in episode 10, I think you said it was, and just try to go there for a month. I love that. So yeah, that sort of wraps up, I think, the top 5 most commonly Googled asked questions. And we actually had 10 on our list that we were going to see how much we could get through quickly. We didn't know how quickly we'd answer these questions. So we may do a part 2, potentially even next week, on the second most commonly asked questions. But as part of those top 10 most commonly asked questions, we'll attack those next 5 because they're equally good. As we were looking at all of these, we couldn't cut out any because they're all really important questions. So definitely check back either next week or very soon to get the remaining 5 top 10 questions about digital nomad life answered. And anything else, Jeff, you want to share?
No, other than write us in at hello@beachcommute.com with your questions. We oftentimes get very good questions and entire podcast topics based on those questions. We seem to get very immersed in this lifestyle and maybe forget some about the early on questions that we had. So we really do like getting any correspondence from you about jobs, about digital nomad lifestyle, locations, any of that stuff. We do this stuff every day. We talk about this stuff, and that's probably the most enjoyable part of this job for me is when people write in and ask questions or comment, whatever you like. Other than that, whatever device you're on, please jump in there, give us a review. It helps us out quite a bit. Spotify, whatever, iTunes.
The follow, the 5 stars. It really helps more people find this podcast. And it's so fun to see the numbers grow and more of you listening and binging. And I feel like so many people who write in are like, I found this podcast. I just Googled Digital Nomads. I found it. And then I've been like binging like hundreds of episodes. So it's fun. There's a lot of value-packed information here. And it's like if you're like right around that time of just ready to start your digital nomad life or thinking about it or just now considering it, there's so much in here to learn, and it's really fun for us to hear from you as you go. And I'll say lastly, we do have a premium membership called Digital Nomad Jobs Daily. And with that, you can get 2 remote companies with active job listings that day sent to you every Monday through Friday. So throughout the week, we'd have a whole team of experts who scours the globe for the best remote companies actually hiring. They're sometimes very hard to find. And we have a team who does that for you, saves you the time, and we send you those companies each day so you can apply to the ones that really excite you. So check out our website, beachcommute.com, if you want to go and join that membership. And otherwise, just hop on our email list to start to get some ideas of what that's like.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening, and we will see you again next week.